It's 5:30. I'll call the meeting to order. Tonight is a special meeting for a work session with the commissioners and the city manager. The session is just to establish open dialogue between us, kind of set a direction for the year. Until you sit on the commission and only have 3 commissioners and 2 form a majority, and we have no opportunity to visit outside of a commission meeting. So every time we come into the meeting, all we've had opportunity to do is look at the agenda. We have no chance to discuss or to get any feedback or bounce anything off of another commissioner until we sit here at the table, and then it's focused time on conducting the business and reviewing. So we really don't have the opportunity just to share, and particularly with all 3 of us, the opportunity to share with the city manager at one time. I think from what I saw going through our city manager interviews, and Amanda had quoted it in the paper, that I see the real need for us to become a team with the city manager, that we can set a direction not just for 1 year at a time like we do in our budgeting, but look down the road, not only look at 5 or 6, but get an effective direction for 10 years. What I saw when we interviewed Craig, his skills at organizing and planning and budgeting, that was a real asset for us as a city to start setting some of those goals and directions. And since the league changed the election to November, it gives us the chance now, not into a year, but at the beginning of the year, to come together and share and just see what we can do, because 2 heads are better than 1, and all of us coming together and sharing, I think we can make a more effective team and set long-term goals and get things organized. As sometimes in the past I felt like we're jumping from fire to fire or emergency to emergency, but this will maybe enable us to share and benefit from all of our experiences and knowledges. So tonight it is open dialogue for us, the commissioners and the city manager. There is no input from the audience. It is limited to us 4. So with that, I'll open to the commissioners. There's some things I've made notes of, but Gary or Lewis, do you want?
Lewis, do you want to jump in?
Gary, I'll let you go first. This is new to me too, so we have experience.
One thing that we have sort of talked around in the past is maybe increasing the number of commissioners. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't mind discussing that because, as you might remember, I was on city commission in another city with 5 commissioners, and it just seemed vastly easier, where I could sit down and have a cup of coffee with one of the other commissioners and say, what do you think about this? Because then it wasn't a quorum. And I know that there are very few cities in the state that have just 3 commissioners, just a handful. And so I don't know how you gentlemen feel about it or how Craig feels about it, but it seems like that's something I would love to know what you guys think and Craig thinks about that.
Yeah, I would agree that increasing the number would be beneficial. I know a lot of citizens have come to me and suggested that we increase the number from 3 to at least 5, but we've kind of kicked the idea around. But I would be in favor of looking into increasing our.
Well, at least maybe look into it a little bit. I don't know if we've ever formally done that. I think, at least I don't remember ever going any further than just saying we ought to look into that.
I've got to agree with that also. I think that's what hurts the commissioners in the past and even present. We just don't have the ability to sit down and find out what what each one of us are thinking on a lot of different issues until we come here. And then we're doing an agenda that's already planned out, and we're trying to do the regular business twice a month. And I think that's hurt us in the past. I'm glad we're having an open work session, and I would like to see more of that. It gives us a chance to give a better understanding where each of us, what each of us think on certain issues, and it will allow us in the long run to make better decisions. And the other part of this coin is that it's transparent. I don't think we do enough to involve ourselves, make ourselves available out to the public. You know, I get questions all the time that are asked of me, and I do research. I try to find out answers to these questions, why things are this way and that way, you know, what's being done, what isn't being done, and I pass these concerns on either to Kelly or Craig, because I'm in no position to direct someone to go out and fix a hole in a road, but I always encourage them to contact the right people. But in the long run, us three, we're accountable to the people that elected us. If we don't do our job here, if we don't do our due diligence here, we won't be here next time around, and by rights, we shouldn't be. So we're accountable. We're accountable to the people that elected us. Craig's accountable to us. And there will be times when we'll sit down, and some conversations may not be pleasant, but that's the reality of everything that we face. He's accountable to us. The city staff and the people that work for the city are accountable to him. That's what people expect from us. Accountability, that we do our work, we do it efficiently. When we run into problems, we identify what the problem is, as painful as it can be sometimes, but we solve the problems for the betterment of the city as a whole, and we move on.
Yeah, I think from what I've looked in the past with increasing the number, there's one process is with a petition from the voters that they can gather signatures and requesting an increase in the size of the commission, and then with that, bring it to a vote. We need to look and see if I haven't seen an option listed as commission motivated, but we need to look at the two options and get a report back and do it, you know, not just talk, but we need to set a time frame to get the information back that we will know our options.
Right. I'm convinced if 98% of the cities in Kansas have 5 commissioners or more, there's a reason for it. And frankly, not to throw you under the bus, but there have been some issues where somebody would come to me between meetings and say, look, I know Fred's against it, and I know Leonard's for it, so you're going to be the decision maker. And I don't like being in that position.
No.
I don't think I should be.
No.
You know, it's like, okay, one person's making a decision that might cost the city millions of dollars or whatever. So my gut feel is 5's a better number. And from having been with a 5-person commission, it was just a lot easier. And this is a tough job.
If I can just, from my perspective, of course, I worked in lots of different cities, and this is the small. I've never worked for either as assistant or city manager for a commission this small. In fact, it was a concern when I was looking at this job and I found out there was only 3 commissioners. I didn't know how that worked, and it seemed problematic to me somewhat. But so I concur with what you're saying about increasing to 5. I mean, I've worked in city this size, but we had 9 on the council.
Wow.
But it was partisan politics, you know. So you ran as a Democrat or Republican.
I'm not in favor of 9.
But I'm not in favor of 9. I worked with one city was 11. I wasn't city manager in either of those places. But the most common that I have has been 5, and I think that has worked well.
Yeah, there are.
2015, the legislature amended the statutes on city governance, and we adopted that when they changed the election dates. And I'd actually researched that in anticipation that you might want to do that. I believe you don't need a petition from anybody. I think but you have to put it to a popular vote. The league said because of the way we adopted what we have now, it was a popular vote. The only way to undo it is by popular vote. So if you guys voted majority vote 3-0 or 2-1 to put it on the next election or special election, you could do that.
Yeah, I've talked to different commissioners at the league conventions, and there are towns smaller than us that will have 5 or even 7, and some option is looking at wards or districts, and towns smaller than us have done that. And I think expanding to 5 would be really advantageous. And like you're saying, that, you know, we want to do the best for the city, and it's hard when you get put in that situation that you are the swing vote, and how. And
you can't abstain.
yeah. So, well, why don't, Craig, can we visit with that, say the first of the week, to get some information gathered up and get us to us commissioners? We can get it on an agenda to review and discuss
Yeah.
what the findings are, so we can timely act on it, to look at getting our information, so the next election, if we decide to go ahead, we could add that to and not create a special election for it.
Sure.
Okay? Well, one thing that I was wanting to visit about direction with the steering committee's recommendation for the renovation of existing City Hall. When Craig and I visited, I think the 18th, briefly kind of, so we needed to look at action, what it was going to be now with the change in commission, to get direction. You know, we're all aware of what the steering committee's recommendation was. Lewis served on the steering committee. Some of the things, looking at, you know, with existing City Hall renovation, we had funds from special use sales tax budget, and the budget for roof replacement, window replacement, electric upgrades, I think maybe some waterproofing and tuck pointing. You know, I look back in 1990, the elevator was installed, and at that time, we waterproofed the basement, and there was a perimeter drain and a pump installed. So some of the waterproofing might need to be investigated to see its condition. It was if I remember right, it was a catalyzed rubber coating that was put on the wall, was cleaned, the stone applied.
On the outside?
Yeah, on the outside. And then backfilled, there's a protection board backfilled with rock up to about 6 or 8 inches from the top. But, you know, with our funds there, with the condition of the roof, the windows, the masonry, and the waterproofing, we're getting water into the building that's going to continue to deteriorate. You know, those items can be worked ahead of time. They don't have to be tied into an actual renovation. Even if you have an idea of general walls to remove, you can do demolition work inside to prepare the space. You know, I think maybe with Trainer, we need to have a meeting and just go ahead and start visiting with them about the option to go ahead with some of the waterproofing items, so we can preserve the structure. The roof is concrete, but, you know, you still get water into a structure that wasn't intended. You'll start getting rust bloom on the concrete, which is going to break down the concrete deck, and the walls continue to deteriorate and become more of a problem. So, there is a way we can use our special use sales tax to start the process without looking at bond funds, and even, some of the ADA issues would be applicable to our ADA money to do some entrance or start looking at that process. So I'll throw that out for discussion.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I was just assuming we'd do it all at one time, but I know when I buy an old downtown building, the first thing I do is waterproof it, fix the roof and windows and all, keep the weather out. So that makes a lot of sense, at first blush at least.
My question, to be clear, is that just kind of a stopgap right now? Let's seal the building so it doesn't get any worse from the water leakage as we proceed to decide what we ultimately do at one time? Or is this like phase one and kind of piecemeal or patch it and move to the next? And you see what I'm asking? To me, it sounds like yeah, if it's leaking now, let's fix that. But to me, we still need to look at major renovation.
Yeah, what I was thinking is start the process while we're looking at the renovation.
Okay.
This way we can seal it, because, the more moisture we get in, the longer it's going to take for the walls and the concrete to dry out. And we don't want to seal moisture into the structure, that if you go in and waterproof the outside and don't allow the time for the building to cure again, you trap moisture in that's going to damage the fixtures, or eventually, come into the new construction too. So I could see starting the process of sealing the envelope while we look at the options to
Well,
continue the
what I
renovation. Yeah. And, I think looking with the total package, and part of the process would be to evaluate the cost of where we're going to be with existing City Hall renovation, to even, at this point, can we do 2 projects versus 1? We had a party interested in purchasing Building D, where if a transaction could be made on that, it could give us funds to operate without bonding the whole amount. And some of the numbers we're looking at, we're getting closer to reducing the cost on existing City Hall, and even with deferred building maintenance, as the money comes in each year, it gives us more funds to accumulate to cut down the initial, the total construction cost of the renovation. But I think we need to move forward, and this would be a method we're going to have to roof it, we're going to have to windows, and none of that would be taken out of during a renovation. We're not wasting anything. All that is going to be static for the new construction too.
I have to agree with that. Stabilize the building. I sat on the steering committee, and the citizens that were appointed, they felt that the building was an anchor of downtown, and the building itself had value. And the longer the process draws out, the more money we're going to go through. And that doesn't look like that's going to get any cheaper as we go along. But there's certain things we can do with the building that will stabilize it, that will get us a jump when we do proceed with the renovation of the 1916 City Hall. That'll reduce some of the cost that's going to be involved. That was projected to renovate the 1916 City Hall. And as far as the steering committee was concerned, I was I wasn't happy with the dollar amount because I thought it was excessive. And I think most people that have come to me have also, their opinion was that it was excessive. There's definitely better options out there that we can look at and do. You know, I want to build something that's durable and meets our needs, but we also have to look at it being cost effective. You know, if we can reduce that dollar amount to something reasonable to where we're not borrowing so much money, then we're talking about less payments. And if it ends up being, let's say it ends up being paid for through an existing, that special use sales tax that we extend down the line, the people agree to extend that past its sunset in 2022. On the back end of that, that will give us more money to use. Some of it we could put in as a cushion, and some of it we can use to start addressing other needs here in the community. So, you know, the bigger cushion we have, that gives us more money to deal with some of the infrastructure needs of the community. So I'd like to see us proceed in that manner and reduce the cost. I had a chance to look at the 27,000 square foot facility in the public safety building in Coffeyville. It's set up to hold 55 people. They've got 4 bay, drive-through bay. They've got living quarters, exercise room, TV room, full kitchen. They have their individual offices. It's a well-designed building, and it took them a good period of time to come up with that design. It's a design-build concept, so they had an architect on hand that worked with the contractor as the building was being built, and they found ways to save money. And the end result was they've got a very nice, efficient building, and it meets their needs and it serves their purpose. And they set up a budget, or they set up a dollar amount, and I don't know how they determined that, of $5.4 million, and the project came in a little over $5.4 million. So it was a win-win for the taxpayers and a win-win for the public safety people, because they saw the need that they needed a facility. So, and I think we do too, but I also have to look at something that's take into consideration the entire community, how it's going to affect the community. So we, you know, as me sitting here, I have to always keep that in mind. If money wasn't an object, that, I mean, we could just do whatever we wanted to do, but unfortunately, that's just not the case. So we need to look at this very thorough and smart, and spend dollars wisely.
That building was just a fire EMS, right? It wasn't a public safety, police, fire. It was just fire EMS?
It was fire and police.
Fire and police. It
Fire and
did have
police,
both.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it was concrete block and wood construction. Crossland was the builder on it. I know one of the guys that was involved in the contracting process with Crossland. So it's a well-designed building, but they worked hard at it to make the cost reasonable and still meet the needs of the employees. And the employees had input, which by right, you know, they should. But you have to look at it as a community-wide, you know, how is the community going to get behind it? Because that's the ultimate, it's going to decide, you know, whether the facility happens or not. If it's something that the public realizes that we need and the costs are reasonable, I think, you know, they'll get behind it. I don't think they're going to like the idea of spending more money, but we also realize that we've gotten by for a lot of years not investing in the 1916 City Hall. We've let it deteriorate, and, you know, the blame's shared community-wide. We just chose not to do anything about it, and we just can't operate like that.
If I just quickly, 2 things. And of course, the concept that we talked about last December, of course, which was what the committee recommended, was, you know, rehabilitating the 1916 building and then building a public safety building, as you talked about in Coffeyville. And that's what we were going to move forward with, as bringing to a vote. I just, my own philosophy, I think that's probably the best plan, and I only say that and not in terms of dollars. I recognize that that's always the factor. And once we get into design, maybe we can get our public safety, the concept down. The way I look at it philosophically is you've got the 1916 building. It's a historic landmark for this community. I think you've got one time here to really do it right. I'm not saying you build something, you know, grandiose in there, but you rehabilitate it so that it is a functional, useful, for not only the employees in there, but for the walk-in traffic, the public that comes into the building, and something that I think the community can be proud of. Now, as you say, you have to temper all those things with a budget. And once we get farther in design, that's where you start looking at, you know, what's it going to cost and what can we do, and you make adjustments there. But that's just my philosophy. I've been through 2 city hall rehabilitations, and I was very appreciative of the direction of the city, those cities. That was a goal, is to do it right. And I think that's what the committee recommended, is kind of do it right and make a nice facility. But I recognize, obviously, budgets always come into play. It always comes down to money. And we have we looked at a financing plan. It uses that special use sales tax. It didn't get into the property tax. But of course, it was contingent on the special use sales tax being reapproved by the voters in 2022. So anyway, that's just my philosophy. But to me, it's like you got one chance here really to do a good job and make it a really another landmark for 100 years for the city of Independence.
And I think with the changes of technology and business operation, that we can look at both facilities and look that business isn't handled the same way it was, and it's, you know, my son doesn't go to an office, but he can work from his house, and a lot of companies are going that way. So the whole technology is changing, that we have the opportunity, like you say, to look at our existing building and spend wisely there, and then also with the support facility. But by starting now, we can start moving forward, and we'll be adjusting that bottom line dollar for both, and then at the same time exploring the options of, you know, design build changes the process from the architect coming up with the total bid package and the contractors submitting based on that, to taking the designer into the contractor's office, and they work together to determine the best cost. So you're getting the best of both worlds, the knowledge of the architect and the knowledge of the contractor coming together to get that cost down. So that's where we could look.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think as a starting point, if maybe we could schedule a meeting with Andy Pitt, maybe that would be the first step going to, so we could share and he could share with us, and then we could get a direction to proceed.
Does that mean you're assuming he will be the architect for the project? Or is this just to get
Well,
further information from him about the process?
I think we could start with him on the weatherproofing, open a dialogue, but not hand him a contract or a bottom line.
Yeah.
You know, I think we need to look with a project like this. He's not the only firm
Right.
that's available.
Yeah.
I would, you know, I think we need to open it up farther than we have in the past. That,
Well, before we were looking for very specific skill sets, maybe
Yeah.
to lead this process this committee was going to go through. But I don't remember looking at their qualifications to design a project like this. And I don't want to automatically assume they're our chosen architect.
for the waterproofing and
I'm
that,
okay
or
with
the
that.
design?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, to get the building sealed up, but then maybe then we need to look at discussing after we visit to see if they are interested in doing phase one. Discuss some qualifications that need to be sent out, or how we would proceed to get requests for qualifications. And then, you know, I always, as an architect, I hated to submit a price and be selected by the bottom line without the ability being considered. So, you know, if you go request for qualifications first, and you have a dialogue and interviews based upon that, then go to the fee negotiations, because you're looking at ability and workability of the firm with the client. And, you know, it could do the same thing of getting the building sealed to preserve and to prepare for the next phase, while we're looking at qualifications from interested firms. That might be best to keep it competitive on our fee with qualifications and go to proposal. I don't know, is that what you're thinking?
That's what I was thinking.
Okay. So, schedule a meeting with Andy to discuss phase one, and I don't know, we could maybe establish a scope of work, and if you want, I can get with Craig and we can define scope of work in phase one, then get it to the commission to look to see expanding or reducing that scope, and then after that, we could contact Andy. Agreement?
I agree.
Works for me.
Okay. Somebody sent me some information about Chanute, that they have a commission public forum quarterly, that they have an opportunity to field questions from the public. I know there's it's really hard, and I can see the frustration of during our commission meeting, addressing the commission, and for time and information, we don't have the opportunity to respond. And either with a public forum to visit with the commission, we could take questions at that time and then release answers later. But just, you know, there's a lot of questions on operations of the commission, our roles, city manager's roles, ordinances, planning, zoning, different directions that, you know, maybe it would help improve the dialogue definitely with the citizens. And if it doesn't work, you don't do number
Right.
two.
We could certainly try it. When you were doing your listening tours, and then when I was mayor, I did it because I thought it was a great idea when you were doing it. I did like 10 of them. And, you know, the first one I had 15 people there, and the next one I had 12, then 8, and 6. Pretty soon I was there by myself.
Yeah.
And so, but I don't see how it could hurt to try it and see if we, you know, nobody shows up, or the second one nobody shows up, that's fine. But I do think it's really important to give people a chance, access to the commission to ask questions and air grievances and get a response, unlike the typical meeting where we can't respond.
What I tried to do was establish a format too, so there was some order ahead of time. And I think that would be important if we do it, that we
Have some-
think and give some guidelines, you know,
Yeah.
similar to the ordinance for addressing the commission in public meetings, but yet have some guidelines so we could have some direction and just to keep decorum and order and establish not only a respect for the commission and us respect them, but citizen to citizen. So,
Yeah, I think some ground rules would be a must.
You would structure this, I mean, I would recommend, but a kind of very informal type of a process. I mean, you may be all together, I mean, it was you and I talked about how, you have all three commissioners at once, but it's still a very informal, so it's kind of walking up and just sitting down, talking one-on-one, but informal, not too
right.
strict or
Rigid.
guidelines, but I think that's the best way.
Yeah. I even wondered about like a round robin, or, each of us at a table
Right.
and rotate every 20 minutes, but, keep it in a,
Like a speed dating kind of thing.
yeah. Yeah, do we go with a horn or a bell? But if the commission's interested, I think our first step with each of us to write some ideas on how this would be handled, how we'd like to see the forum conducted. And did you say, Craig, that you had been involved with some or seen some?
Yeah, I've seen it done in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's just one commissioner or one council member or the mayor. I've saw that a lot where the mayor would, come down and have coffee with the mayor every Saturday morning at 9, that type of a very informal. Or I've seen it as a group. You could do it. So, yeah, there's however you want to do it. Just keep it in, very informal way so it's open.
Well, if you could give us some input, too, if you could write down some ideas,
Sure.
and then each of us write what we think, then we can share them through Craig. He can get back, copy all of us, then we can read them and then get together to discuss how we'd want to proceed.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me, too. Good idea. Hopefully it'll work and people will take advantage of this. They'll have an opportunity. Maybe that'll eliminate a lot of calls. Maybe not.
Another idea kind of relates to this is, Gary, you had your column while you were mayor. And I was wondering if we could take that and use it for like a commissioner's column, that if the citizens had questions, they could submit them. I talked to Josh to see if he'd be willing to offer a space, and he is. And he said in the past they've had like a Facebook page or something that was secured that citizens could submit questions through that, and then it could come to us to answer throughout the year, or rotate among the commissioners that an update on a project, or you've been involved with the fruit orchards, something that we're each involved with in the community, to give some update to the citizens where we are, or that we can answer questions and things like.
I'd be certainly willing to try it. I can see it could be kind of complicated since we can't talk amongst ourselves outside of the meeting. We'd have to figure out a way to, who's going to handle what if questions materialize.
Shall we go to?
Yeah, that would be fine. I think the more we make ourselves available, to the public, whether in print or social media, I think it can't hurt us. We're just here trying to do the best we can. That's what is expected
Maybe you
of us.
rotate each month or something. This month you answer questions, next month it's something like that, so it gets away from that complication of communicating.
I can visit with Josh to maybe him write an outline of how
Oh, he
he
sees it
would
going.
be able to work with us, and then get that to each of us to see.
Jeff just suggested if a question came in that maybe the mayor, you could assign, say, okay, Louis, would you take this question? And
Okay.
although I can't talk to him, right? You can't-
You could do it at a meeting.
You can assign somebody to answer
I
it
know, just-
based
Yeah.
on expertise or something.
You could
Something
assign-
like that about the generation issues of the chiller unit. It's Lewis's, no.
You could assign Jeff to do it, too.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good idea, too. Gary, you got something else?
Oh,
I don't want to dominate the,
I always have lots of things on my mind, but they're usually little things. You know, one thing that I would like to see us continue is our efforts on the condemnations. We've, you know, we keep having these fires, and they're in empty houses. In some cases, they've been empty for 20 years, and I've got one 2 doors down from me that's been empty for 15 years, and I just want to make sure we're taking the steps we need to take to minimize blight in the city. I know in my neighborhood, there's still some really bad, ugly-looking houses that, I don't know how long they've been empty, but a long time. And I know that it's a lot of work for our city staff. It's hard to keep up with that when you're having to do all the sampling for asbestos and testing, and it takes a long time, but I just, I would like to maintain that effort as we have been.
yeah. I've noticed that there's some houses that are in farther state of disrepair than others, and sometimes we'll go through with condemnation
Right.
on a house, and
The one next door is worse.
right.
Yeah.
So, and I think at our last commission meeting, I brought up a spreadsheet or some way that we could catalog or document so we keep track of where we are on these, and maybe with that rank the condition so that we do start removing the more severely deteriorated before a marginal house. But you know, it is a problem with children in the neighborhood with an unsecure house getting in, vagrants, other issues, drugs and what have you, that we do need to.
Well, property values
Fires.
too. You know, if somebody is living in a nice home, but the one next door to them is, the doors are standing open, the windows are broken out, they can't sell their house at any price, and it really kills our property values in some cases. So I think we owe that to everyone, to not just safety, but to maintain our property values.
Yeah, just as an FYI, I mean, we do actually have a spreadsheet. Dave and Don are working very diligently on. Again, it's like you say, we can do what we can do with the staff we have, but I think we're very well organized in that regard, tracking things along those lines. And as you know, we act based on complaint. So like you say, one structure may not be on the list, but next door it is, because we got a complaint. It's typically how we take action. Anyway, just FYI. So we're making progress, at trying to maintain it, and so.
We've only really, been aggressively, look at this, 2 years?
Been doing it
Three?
pretty much since I got on,
Okay.
so
I know
that's 3.
it jumped from like 10 a year to looking at 50 to 75
Oh,
houses a
alright.
year.
Yeah, we were meeting essentially every week for a while there.
Yeah.
too.
Okay,
I have a question that kind of ties into that, and I'm just asking because I don't know. When a person has a complaint about property, especially rental property, to where there's been some issues with the renter in the property, and an example, let's say the renter moves out, and there's piles of trash in the back. It's been there for months and months. Trash throughout the yard, and if I understood right through Kelly, that there's an inspector that goes out and takes a look at that, and they cite the actual owner of the property, but is there is there a follow-up after the citation's been issued to go back to see if those issues have been corrected? Do we do any follow-up? Do we do any tracking of that to make sure that?
That's actually, environmental issues are handled through the fire department.
Okay, so they're doing the follow-up. Is there a time
Because they will cite them
frame?
into court if they do not clean it up.
Okay. And then what's the time frame on that? Is it like 30 days? Once you issue a citation, is it like 30, you give them 30 days, you give them 6 weeks? Is it?
Very, Janet.
I think it's based, there's several ordinances you can go under. It depends on the type of nuisance it is.
Okay,
And I don't have all the notice deadlines memorized. Could be 14, might be 30 days. But first thing you do is give them notice.
right,
Give them an opportunity for self-help, clean it up themselves. Then if they don't, I think staff has several options. One is cite them in the municipal court.
okay,
And sometimes the judge there, if he finds they're in violation, will give them a per diem fine, let's say $50 a day till you get it cleaned up. Or I think the city has an option if it's really, really bad, and it's like public safety issues, to clean it up themselves and assess it against the property owner.
okay.
I think the staff just tries to handle it as best they can depending on what they find.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and that answers my question. I've had that come up a couple of times, and I really didn't understand the procedure, but anyway, thank you.
There are several different procedures.
Okay.
And I think some of it deals, well, like Craig mentioned with the condemnations, a limited staff time to just go back and keep re-inspecting. So it does sometimes take longer than what we hope. But if the public notices that, and they'll file a complaint, and then if they see that it's not being taken care of, the best thing is to call again and make sure that it's moving forward. That I'm sure staff will let them know where it is in the process, and it can be remedied through that. Do you have anything, another item, Lewis?
No, not concerning that particular topic.
Okay. Another topic?
Any other concerns? Let's see, I wrote several things down here. Some of the statements I've already made earlier, and I had a good long conversation with Craig, and you know, we have a lot on the plate, a lot that we have to address. You know, we're going to try to be as open as we can, you know, wherever possible. That's something that I think we've lacked in the past. You know, you're not going to sit up here in any of these positions and going to do everything 100% right all the time. But what we're going to do, we're going to research topics that we have. We're going to depend on the city to give us valuable information in a timely manner, and that it's correct information that we can base and make good decisions on. And that's our job here. You're not going to sit up here and please everyone all the time. I realize that. But that's not why I'm here. It's not why none of us are here. We realize that the people are wanting us to move the city forward, and with the city staff, Craig, the commissioners here, it's what we're going to do. We're going to try to do it in the best way possible and open. And you know, any of us here will listen to your critique, your complaints, your concerns, what you want to address. I'm available anytime, any place. My wife tells me I'm retired and I have all the time in the world. But I'm not going to disagree with her on that. But I think any of us, I think, will be more than happy to sit down with you one-on-one as a group whenever you want to and address your concerns. We're just trying to make it better for everyone here in the city and move the ball forward. That's why we're here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, with our projects and the various consultants we've utilized, I noticed some that will get behind on their completion and parts of their contract that they've agreed to do gets overlooked.
Like an engineering consultant, you mean?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And, you know, some of the things, the electric and the planters, you know, it's the airport terminal design, they exceeded the construction amount by over $200,000. And now, you know, we paid them, but we have a worthless design.
Mhm.
And they, by exceeding their contract, that, you know, it's hard. We get a lot of projects going, and it's almost like the condemnations. They're easy to get left behind, and we forget where we are
Lose
in
sight of
our
it.
schedule. And even, you know, we'll go through our agenda, and we'll act on something, and then something about the contract will come up months later, and it's like, where did that fit? You know, again, you know, if we had a spreadsheet that listed our projects and where they are along the scope of completion, it would be beneficial. And I think the one that kind of concerns me with our water treatment plant, the electrical, when we discussed with PEC, the different components, it's like, yeah, the electrical needs to be done. It can be completed quickly. And they were in agreement that the electrical could be put ahead of the basin study and that, but, you know, for the work that had to be done electrically, it doesn't take as long to design it as they've taken. You know, I think sometimes they're good to get the proposal and get the contract, but
It feels
you
like
know,
we should have seen more progress on that one, doesn't it?
yeah. And there's been a couple that get put back, and I don't know why, but it's a rush to get it completed within the allotted time by our grant or our loan process. That you know, we need to make sure that the consultants give us correct information, accurate information, that they stay on schedule with completion and complete their contract. That's not too much for us to ask for the fees that we're paying. And, you know, it just, I know you've had one review that they called 30% on the water treatment plant, but the design work and documentation, it's not a long process to get that covered and get it out to bid. So are we getting closer to them completing their?
Yeah, we're actually there, I'd say, what, 90% design of, and not just the electrical, but is it 90? Anyway, they're far enough along with it, they could submit it to the state. As you know, this has to all be approved by the state, so that drags out the timeline. But their design that they've done is not just the electrical, they've done the whole package, except for the basins that may be done, you know, in 10 years or something, but nothing major now. Correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, but
You're pretty much right. They have a design concept that they've submitted to the state for approval at this point. We have projected costs we just received for everything. And their timeline on the electrical design should be finished by the middle of this month. so they, which is not, I mean, timing is not great. Like you say, it shouldn't have taken this long.
It's terrible.
Not just not great.
I
Well,
Yeah.
I
maybe,
expected it, you know, within a month of when they signed the contract. But it didn't turn out that way. So we should see a lot of progress in the next.
Yeah.
I don't see why it shouldn't be able to put some stuff out to bids in the next couple of months. Of course, you know, with the state and the loan money, it has to be advertised for 30 days.
Right.
And it adds time to everything, so.
Right, 30 days, then 30 days for the contract, then manufacturing of the distribution panels. So, you know, that's where this type of project, when you're kind of living on a prayer that something won't go wrong, and we're going into the storm season with lightning strikes increasing, you know, that's, you know, I think we get taken advantage of. And when we did the interview with them, it was discuss the severity and can you do this, you know, because the concept of the perimeter security fence isn't keyed into the electrical distribution at all. You know, you're looking at two different, they're looking at an architectural consultant that they brought in for that and an engineering, in-house engineer that did the electrical design. And, you know, it's just a serious situation we've got for water for the city. And I would need to be more adamant with our consultants that the timing is essential if you know.
I was
Would it-
pretty adamant with them the other day.
Yeah.
would it,
Yeah, I had a
The amount
few,
of time this electrical is taking.
I suggest, well, specifically for this project, and Terry and I talked about, you know, initially coming to, we'd reached a certain point with the design that we were going to come back and to get ready to go out to bid, obviously, for some things. But why don't we, Terry and I, get back to, give you a little report on exactly where
Okay.
we are, and maybe working with the engineer, what is the time schedule now? And the type of thing, and the steps that we need to take to get the contracts let to start
Yeah.
construction.
would it be possible when we drew up this contract to maybe set some guidelines as far as time when we expect, I'm not an architect, and I'm not real familiar with the process, but is that something that we could put into guidelines as, this is the process, this is the amount of time that it should take, and we expect, you know, this to be designed to be drawn and presented within X amount of time. So we're holding them to a schedule, and that's part of the contract that they're signing. So that way they're gonna hold true to the contract. And maybe if we have trouble with a particular engineering firm, maybe you put teeth in it. And if you can't meet this guideline, then we put teeth in it, and you're gonna be penalized a certain percentage. You know, I don't know whether that's feasible, whether that could work, and maybe it doesn't make any sense at all, but maybe you could build that into the contract. And you'd have to look at each individual contract on its own merit, but at least you're not strung out for months and months and months because they did a good job of selling the project to you, but they did a lousy job of following up.
it's hard. Legally, we can't charge a penalty. It has to be resolved in liquidated damages. And with the design firm, it's hard to determine what a liquidated damage could be. I've not seen that usually the recourse is it happens once and you just don't consider them for future work.
You know, that's a good point, because when you let out the construction bid, you always have a deadline, but when you're hiring a professional in your engineering architecture, very rarely do you set a deadline. That's a good point.
But it is, in the case we're looking at with the water treatment plant, it is critical. 'Cause, you know, you're looking at the approval process of plan review, the allotted time for bidding, the contract time, the start of construction. All that just makes the problem more critical. I think it's a good idea to ask the engineer to give a projection of time so that you have the markers, and when you develop a spreadsheet to document and track all the projects, then you're looking at one source and you can monitor it a lot easier, so that and a consultant, if they're getting behind, you're aware and you're pushing. I know everybody is busy, that it's easy to say, well, it's in their hands, they're working on it, and then pretty soon it's 2 months have passed and it seems like a week. And time goes so fast, so it could help. And then once a month or so, just to update the commission on where the projects are, and also then the public could keep a track of it too.
Yeah.
I guess the whole idea is to hold them accountable.
Mhm.
You know, they're taking money from us, from the taxpayers, and this is what they promised to do, and they've, you know, they got some type of guidelines that they need to meet, and we're gonna hold you to it. If you don't think you can handle the project and meet the guidelines, then we're gonna look elsewhere. But
Yeah, it has been known to have a client sit down with a consultant and said, do you want to do any more of my work? You know, everybody goes through different phases that they can have legitimate occurrence that delay a project, but those times do bring results. Okay. The core requests, we had the consent with the Attorney General on response, and we changed our price structure, and we're pretty much staying on track with that. We did approve the price revision and everything.
Right, we're using the new structure
Okay.
for that electronic copies, if you will. Computer
Yeah.
issue.
Right.
are we meeting the timeline, the 3-day timeline when a request is made?
Yeah, that's Mike's responsibility, obviously, as clerk, and I haven't seen anything where we have not met that.
When people have asked me, I've always told them if they've, when they make a request, that if they sit down with Mike and explain exactly what it is they're looking for, and that way he knows exactly what they're looking, they have an understanding that this is what I want, and there's no confusion or gray area there, so
Yeah.
he doesn't have to waste a lot of time trying to look for that
Right.
information. Rather than neither one is, they have a misunderstanding about what they actually wanted. So if you can address that issue right up front, then that'll save you time, because generally you know exactly what you're looking for, how to get it, present it, and you know, maybe even beat the timeline. But
Yeah.
you know, I'm hoping that this process that we've adopted here, that this is the end of complaints about not getting information in a timely manner.
One
I'm
issue,
hoping.
speaking of timeliness, so there's confusion about, in the law it says there's so many business days to respond, that Mike has to respond regarding estimated costs and so forth. It's how you count those days. Sometimes they think the day starts on this day, but by law, no, it's really starting on this day. So sometime it might appear that if Mike gets it on the third day, they think it's the fourth day, but there's some I've seen some confusion there, how the law is interpreted.
I'm confused already.
Do we have a copy of the Cora manual that the league produced that's available for Mike? Because in the Cora manual, it addresses that. I think it says that the time starts only when it's given to the record custodian. So, if you understand that, it's not 3 days after the mail, but it's 3 days after the record custodian has it. So it allows the time to circulate to get to the custodian doesn't count for the 3-day.
And I included a
limit.
copy of the core in our orientation manual that you got. So there is a copy of that in there, so if he doesn't have one, I can give him
Yeah.
that copy.
Well,
Or it's on the website.
The manual, though, has an appendix that it lists like 25 pages of different documents. I got one a couple of years ago. And it lists the documents, so, immediately you can turn to the appendix. So
Right.
if somebody comes in to request a document, they could look to see if it's covered, and it is a public record, and save Mike the time to research it, and maybe a way to save his time and short circuit all that tracking down.
Mike went to the training in the other shade, is that right, Mike?
Yes.
And I think the manual is there, and to be honest, every document starts out as a public document. It's
Mhm.
just, there are 55 exceptions,
Yeah.
and that's where it gets a little hairy. And there's been some things that have transpired that you're probably not aware of. So if you want them to do a report and all that's transpired in the last several months, they'd be happy to do it.
There's, I think, a lot of additions with body cameras and police records. The KDHE loans that we applied for, have we heard anything on whether those were awarded? The water and the sewer KDHE loan?
Yeah, maybe Kelly remembers, but yeah, I don't think there's an issue there. I think,
We did
yeah,
get the loans.
yeah.
I don't know that they've been awarded.
Yeah, not officially, but it's like,
still through the application phase. I think that there's still part of the design that comes into play with those.
oh, okay.
I may be speaking out of place on that, but PEC's handling one side of it, Trans-Systems is handling the other side. But I know that the applications have been made. I think just
Yeah, I know.
through the whole process of the project, I think they have to have everything before they actually award that out.
But I knew we did the application, and that was the last we heard. Is there an award letter that comes saying, okay, you've applied, now when you get the projects, we will grant you the money? Or is it just we're still waiting at that?
My recollection is, yeah, that's basically where we were, that it's not really in question, it's just we got to go through the rest of the process of design and before they actually, then you get the 100% award, then you start drawing down the money, if you will, once you're actually constructing the project. So, we can clarify that for you,
It's,
where we stand exactly, and we'll get back to you on that.
because it's always been confusing, the drawdown process. That Jen had questions and problems, and Mike's struggling with that too. So thought, as we start looking and noticing with the severe cold, how it affected our water lines, the number of breaks and the frozen spots in town that you don't, sewer lines seem to be deep enough that you don't have that coming to the surface. But the water line sure became evident of the condition that we're up against, and I could see the need to get those addressed. We talked about also a spreadsheet with our bonds and our loans to identify the project and the life and the funding source. Is looking at the special use sales tax. We start getting close to the sunset of that tax, projecting on beyond it. I think if we knew where the sunset were and the amounts and which projects, you look at the CDBG number and it doesn't identify what that project was for, but I think as we come and approach the sunset of our sales tax, we maybe need to identify our projects and scope of work a little better. It seemed to kind of amble. We had money coming in, but not specific addressed projects, so we could be more effective with that. And as we look at the public safety facility and City Hall, being able to control our amounts there to know where we'll be and what we can do, specific project costs, then we can use and address some in the reelection of it for streets or other infrastructure projects. But anything else?
Yeah. One thing I've heard, I've sort of made it a personal goal to get some new businesses downtown, and called a lot of companies, franchises and stuff, said, what would it take to get get you to put a store in downtown Independence? And I've heard more than once that Independence has a reputation for not being very business friendly. I'm not quite sure what that means. I haven't been able to pin anybody down. I think our city staff is amazing. The projects I've done, they've been great to work with. But that reputation is out there because I've heard it. And I don't know exactly what it means, but it's something I'd like to challenge, I guess, Craig, to try to become known as a business-friendly city, because we need new businesses in town. And one business that opened here recently told me he's, built in 8 cities or something, I can't remember exactly, and we were the most difficult to do business with, which is very distressing. So again, I don't know exactly what that means, but
we could get some input on that. In the city ordinance, there's a Economic Development Advisory Board, and it addresses some of the responsibilities, and it involves looking at the economic development funds and some issues. Maybe this would be a good.
Do we have this board?
No, that's the thing. If maybe a board like that could help alleviate some of the problems that people are facing coming in, and it could be a help for us in looking at having some guidelines for economic development money. It says that Economic Development Advisory Board, it's to recommend and review on an ongoing basis the city's economic development policies, which may pertain to but are not limited to preparation of an economic development strategy, a policy on providing ad valorem tax abatement, granting economic development incentives as permitted by law, and establish guidelines for considering the above request, and study other economic development concerns as determined by the board or requested by the city commission. So, you know, they might be kind of a direct liaison for the city between Montgomery County Action Council and Independence Action Partners to form a stronger team to look at business interests and to develop a policy of how we can utilize the economic development funds to assist an incoming business. So we can form some consistencies of distributing the money to incoming businesses. So I would like for us to look at this and bring it back for discussion about the possibility of starting an economic development advisory board.
Sure. Can I just, I have to respond with Gary's comment, because those type of comments are not unique and new. I have worked, every city I've ever worked in, I've heard that.
New businesses always want you to give them more than what you're giving them.
Well, it's sometimes you can't give them what they want, or they want to do something that you can't do, so you're difficult to work with. Let me just say this, one example. We had this reputation in the city I worked at, so we went through a very detailed process to try to improve our reputation, if you will, make us more business friendly, because we're certainly not anti-business. I mean, we get those charges, that's to me ludicrous. Why would we be anti-business? Why would we try to stop a business? But we are a regulating agency, and we have to do things according to law. Anyway, so we had that reputation. So we went through a very detailed process, including focus groups, working with developers, had developers come in with different facilitator, and we did surveys. Well, it turns out in the surveys we got back from lots of other developers, we were one of the highest ranked cities in terms of being able to work with. We had a good reputation in certain sectors, but if a developer didn't specifically like what they were, maybe they had a bad process for whatever reason. I'm just saying, we certainly want to be pro-business. We'll certainly look at, part of our process is to continuously look at our processes and see how we can improve. If there's regulations or obstacles in the way of development that we can remove, we certainly want to do that. We want to change that reputation, even if it's one person. But I just have to smile when I hear that, because I've heard it all the time, even when it wasn't true, but we still improved our process. So that's part of our goal, is continuous improvement. So we'll certainly look at our process if you put a committee together or working with the county on our process, exactly what maybe there's something out there that is. So if you hear that again, say, well, what was the problem?
Pin them down.
What was the problem?
Yeah, we have to have the problem identified to address it, instead of trying to guess. The more accurate we can be, the more friendly we can become. And
Yeah.
Would this tie into what the part of the reasoning, there's a Chamber of Commerce? And I know the Montgomery County Action Council, they're all into bringing industry into the community. The Chamber and Main Street, Chamber anyway, one of their main tenets is that they are to develop and bring businesses into the city. That's one of their primary goals, not only to promote the city and tourism, but one of the tenets is to find ways to bring, work with the entities to bring in industry, bring in businesses to the community. So this advisory board would be something that would be in addition to the chamber. The chamber has a board that they operate under, so this would be in addition to them, or this would work in conjunction with the chamber and maybe Main Street, because they're all tied together trying to do the same thing.
well, this advisory board would answer direct. Well, all boards are under the city commission, but it would be involved directly with looking at the city funds, ad valorem property tax, or funding source, or economic development funds too. So it would have, I think it would give more tooth for this advisory group to bring in business because they're not going through another organization that has no accountability to the city. This group is accountable direct to the city commission. But, you know, read it over and look at it and see what you feel. This does say that the chamber and the executive director of the Montgomery County Action Council are ex officio non-voting members of the board. So it does tie to get it stronger, but it would start dealing with specific issues that the city would be relating to with the industry. As we approach budget time and start looking at financing, I think during my first year with Daryl and Fred, we had briefly discussed procurement policy. I know the county has established, and some of the other cities have looked at creating procurement policy, and also looking at policies that in bid situations would allow a local contractor, supplier to have a preference if they're not low, over an out-of-town low bidder. So I think there might be some things we could look at to aid our bidding process and help our finances stay in town. I don't remember what the county, I think they established a percentage.
Yeah, that's
or something.
typical in those type of, when you have a local preference, it's typically a percentage. If you're within 5%, you'll give it to the local. If they're less than 5% over the low bid, then you can award it to them. I mean, that's typical. So I've seen 2%. I don't know how it works in Kansas, but.
To be honest, I thought under false ass, we did that. It may have been an unwritten policy.
We'll have to check into
But a
that.
local-
I remember them talking about it, but I don't remember them implementing it.
But I thought they practiced it, whether they implemented it or not.
Yeah, I
could be
think
it is.
sometimes they did. I don't
But
think it
that's
was
a-
a specific written
You
thing.
may be right. Kelly would know. She
Yeah.
took all the minutes.
So maybe look to see what we've got in our archives, if there is one.
See what our
and if
purchasing
not,
policy is.
Look at developing it. I noticed in our requests from different organizations to co-sponsor events, the word co-sponsor, all of a sudden, it kind of jumped out at me, because what is our guideline for co-sponsoring? That if basically we're just allowing the use of the facility at no charge, then maybe we need to develop a policy to drop the word co-sponsoring, that we can identify in writing conditions that organizations would qualify to receive use of one of the facilities without charge. Pretty soon, have we created a place that somebody can come in and want the facility, but by us attaching as a co-sponsor, it could bind us to a group, or we reject a group that we don't want to identify with. So, in trying to avoid a problem, maybe it's something we should look at a policy to allow organizations use of a facility without us co-sponsoring.
The Civic Center has a policy that has tiered levels of, I don't remember what they are. You know, one's for-profit, non-profit, you know, I don't remember what.
And then like other governmental entities during business hours can use the facility for no charge, like the state or the county or the
Different
school,
rate structure.
if it's during business hours.
That's just for this building, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we have it that we could drop the co-sponsoring of events?
I'm just saying there's a set rate structure already in place for
Okay.
this building, not so for other buildings.
Some of those events, like the diversity thing, are held in the evening or
Mhm.
something, and the free thing for the state or whatever is like during business hours. So that would be a nonprofit organization, of which they do have a charge. And then in the evening, there's, you know, it kind of depends on when they're here.
Mhm.
But I know like the city co-sponsors First Friday, but the city actually not only provides that, but they pay for the filming of that. And the city's logo's on that too. It's a coordinated thing with the chamber, so kind of depends on what you're looking at.
Yeah, I think it's something, a written co-sponsor policy, then there's no discrepancy of favoritism or denying that, well, you'll co-sponsor this event, but I've got a similar event, but you're not going to co-sponsor it.
If you offer something for free, everybody will try and come within that definition.
Right, yeah.
Often do.
So maybe if you could get the information together on it. Louis, got any?
Anything else? I wanted to mention when we were talking about procurement policy, I know the county, and I think Kelly, I think you've set in on this, and maybe each of us as commissioners, we can each take a turn on this about interlocal agreements. You know, one thing that everyone in Montgomery County has, it's a commonality, whether you live in Cherryville, Caney, Independence, Coffeyville, whether you work for the city, any of those cities, or the county, we all have one thing in common. That tax dollar is coming from the same people. So I like the idea, and I know there's been discussions on this, and I think you've sat in on some of these, where we can start looking at a cooperative process to where we can identify processes, whether it be equipment or personnel, whatever, or we can start sharing resources. Because, like I said, the tax dollar, it's all coming from the same people. So when you have a limited amount of money that you have to work, that you have available, some cities have less than we have, but it could be something as simple as a piece of equipment that maybe we don't necessarily have to purchase and make a big capital investment, because we could team with the county and contract that service out to them, pay them for the equipment that they need because they're using it countywide. It could be something as simple as buying in bulk product that the county would buy for everyone in the county. You get a better rate by purchasing, 1,000 tons of something versus us buying 50 tons of something. I mean, start looking and thinking outside the box as to everything that we buy, what our job processes are, the capital investment that we have in equipment, and where can we come up with ways of saving money. Either we collaborate in equipment or manpower, however that turns out to be. It could be something as simple as sharing an employee. Maybe we need an employee, maybe we need half of an employee. You can't hire half an employee. Where I worked at, they would always say, well, we could really use a half of a person or 3/4 of a person. We can't justify a full person. But maybe we could look at the county, and the county has an issue, and they say, you know, we could actually use someone additional. So why don't we invest and we'll share the cost? We'll share the cost of this employee. They'll work for the city and for the county. Neither one is hiring a person individually to do this, but it's just a way to try to find ways to save money, and we can use that money for other issues in the community. And it's just an idea, and maybe a lot of these times it's not going to work, but at least it'd be worthy of consideration, and maybe we can rotate when they have meetings. I've talked to Lori McManus, who's on the county commissioners, and they have a meeting maybe once a month, but we could take turns sitting in to see some of these ideas, and you're basically just brainstorming, trying to come up ways of spending dollars as efficient as you can. I mean, until something big changes here, I think all the communities are facing issues, and we need to really think outside the box and look at how we do business. Everything's changed over the years. Technology's changed. We don't write on chalkboards and dusty erasers after class, but we still want to continue to operate our governmental business like we always have, because that's how we've always done it. Well, you know, it's time to move forward, and let's think outside the box, and let's take the cost savings, the cost sharing, no matter where it can be, where we can find it, and let's use it to actually move it towards something that we really need, that we're struggling to find money for. It's an idea.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Actually, it's funny that you said that, because we have a city-county group that meets monthly, and I think that's what you were referring to,
Yes.
Commissioner McManus, because sometimes he comes and sometimes Commissioner York comes, they kind of, but we are getting ready to bring a presentation, Kendall from Coffeyville and Brooke Carroll and Fred Grass, and go to each of the commissions. We've been meeting for about a year, and we're going to provide a report on that. And I believe it's at your next meeting, but I'll have to double check. But we're working on that. We're going to go to each of the communities and kind of, and some of the stuff that we've talked about, and some of it, we've found ways that it could work, and other things we've came up with some challenges on some different things. So we will be reporting to you on that and to all the other commissions as well.
It's on the 22nd.
Is it the 22nd? Okay. Yeah, it's coming up pretty soon, this month.
Would it be possible for any one of us to rotate and take
Yeah.
a turn at sitting in on one
Sure.
of these meetings?
Sure.
Okay.
I think one of the previous league conferences, maybe a governing body institute, at one of the round tables, Kendall mentioned that where he came from, he was instrumental with the city and county forming a cooperative like that, and the impact that it had was significant for him. So, Gary?
I almost hate to bring this up because I brought it up about 6 or 8 times, but the wayfinding signs, you know, we hired a world-renowned consultant to come in and paid him a lot of money, the chamber did, and increasing tourism in the city, and he said you got to have better signage. And so he came up with we hired somebody to come up with a design. He came up with a cost estimate of $300,000, as I remember. We said, no, we're not going there. But then, I don't know, a year ago, the Main Street organization said, we'd like to put some of the signs up with our money. So has the city standardized on a sign design that we can use? And I've not heard anything about that lately, but we've got people eager to spend the money to put up some signs directing people to the downtown and things. And I'd just like to move forward on that this year and get that sign design finalized. I can't remember exactly where it is right now, but.
Yeah, no, I agree. When I first heard that we actually had a design for, because I'm a big believer in the wayfinding signs for a community, and I looked at the designs. It's been a couple of months ago at least, probably time flies, but because when I found out about it, we dug into it, met with the actual, the designer, talked about it, and then started looking at the money, you know. And that kind of put it, I think, initially put it on the back burner, as you said. So if there's a way we can move forward.
At least on
with
some
that.
of them. We've got people wanting to sponsor some of the
Yeah,
songs.
if we have that's great. If we have some sponsors, that will help us move forward, but.
Yeah. Can you check with Main Street, Craig, and see, have somebody check with Main Street and see if they're
Sure.
interest?
So it's financial support.
Mr. Mayor, that's the last note I had written, so you'll be
Okay.
pleased to hear.
No. Lois?
Let me see if there's anything else here. One thing I do want to, when we were talking about maybe getting back with, or going ahead and getting back with Trainer, with Andrew Pitts, maybe we can get to a point where we can set some type of a time guideline as to where how we're gonna progress, and then meet these timelines. And the only reason I say that is that time gets away from us, because we're facing a lot of issues. Time gets away from us, and this way, this sets a goal that we're gonna meet, and that the public understands, in 90 days, this is where we're gonna be, this is what we're gonna do, and we're gonna move forward, and the next process is gonna take X amount of time. We're gonna get to that point, and we're gonna move forward to it. I don't want to be back here a year later, and we're still talking about why we haven't got from A to B. I think people wanna see us set some guidelines, and then make sure we meet those guidelines, so that we are moving in that direction. We're addressing that, and we're gonna move forward and start working on some of these issues that have been pending for a long time. So no matter what we do, I guess that's what I'm asking. I'm all for that, but I want to see guidelines set up that whatever we need, that information will need to be available to us by this time, because we're going to decide on it. We're going to decide how we're going to proceed.
Yeah.
And set a timeline for that, so people can look down the road and say, yeah, they said they would do this over 6 months, and they've done it. And we're starting a process. We're starting to spend money on a renovation of a 1916 City Hall. We're starting to do all the things that we can ahead of time that's not going to involve the total renovation of the building. Stabilize the building and prevent any further damage would be a good start. We're doing an electrical study comparing the power plant and Building D. So you're going to look at the comparison of the electrical usage at both buildings to determine when your peak's being set. What does your off-peak demand look like? What does your power factor look like? And that will actually, once you know that, you will be able to determine if you're actually going to get some cost savings by implementing some money. But my point is that how much money are you willing to spend in addition to what we've already spent on a building that you're not going to be in long-term? When we had the session with Trainer, his opinion was that if we spent $400,000 in making improvements on the facility, that the payback would be 8 years, and we could reduce operating expenses by $50,000. So, and then I've heard others saying that we can spend less and get that savings. So this electrical study will give us a good idea of where we're going to fall at. And it'll give us a chance to look at it and see if that's even possible. Mr. Pitts was very skeptical that you could actually reduce expenses by 50%. And when I look at the demand on the Building D and on the CEP building, you're looking at, reduction of 50% on both facilities. You look at a simple way to look at it is 100 tons of air conditioning is basically, 1 kW. So, you're looking at a demand on the CEP building is probably running, I'm going by memory here, but I bet I'm pretty close. I'm going to say probably somewhere around 180 to 190 kW a month, and you're having pretty much the same demand that's running on Building D. So, to get from a medium general service rate to a small general service rate, you have to be under 200 kW total, and you have to meet that requirement every month just to be able to qualify for a small general service. And with all the improvements that you would have to make, I'm not so sure you could ever get there, but it's at least worth talking about. But the other side of the coin is that, the building was initially a gift with restrictions, but it was a gift. It didn't cost us anything. But we've invested a lot of money into this. And how much money do you want to continue investing into a building that you've already been given direction to by a steering committee that the building should be marketed and moved down the road? And the building, it's appraised at $4.05 million by the county. If it would be, I believe the second group that was interested in the facility as far as the psychiatric ward was concerned, it would be a 10-day max stay. It'd be inpatient. They're still interested in the building. The building has limited uses as it is. But that building is only worth the appraised value. It's only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. I may think it's worth, an example, I may think it's worth $4 million. But in reality, someone may come in and say, it's a down market. The building has limited use. Here's what I'm going to offer you. So how much money do you want to continue to invest in a building you're not going to be in? And it just continues to eat away at limited resources that you have. We've had a 4.67 mill levy go in that was going to be used to fund $3 million bond for health care. And then the following year, we had another 5 mil increase. But that money, all that's gone into, correct me if I'm wrong, the general fund. So how much money are we going to continue to invest? Because there's no guarantee we're going to get anywhere near the money for that building. And especially when I think we know what we have to do. So the longer we put this off, it's just a continual drain on finances. So
I think a good start is with looking at phase one of sealing the envelope on existing city hall, and like you say, set markers that will go forward and try and meet those markers so that we can get a resolve to the situation as soon as possible. Yeah, the ideal for the company that was interested is the HVAC system serves as a hospital, that they can maintain that usage, but we'll look at trying to define what phase one we could consider, and then we can get that to commission, and then after we've looked at it, get with Andy and try and set up a meeting for him to come to a commission meeting, and go over it. So,
Do you have a timeline that you'd like to see this
well,
transpire?
next week, would you have time to get together, Craig? And,
Sure.
okay, we'll try and get that, so, you know, get the points identified, and then to each of us, and we can respond back to Craig, any comments, and he can be the go-between. So, anything else?
No,
Well-
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Appreciate everyone
Can I
coming.
bring up one thing?
Oh, yeah,
I think I've talked individually with each of you about strategic planning, community strategic planning, a broad-based community strategic planning. I don't know what your feelings are on that. If you want me to proceed and, you know, develop an RFQ or something like that, and actually move forward with that, I'd like to know. I think it'd be valuable, as we've talked. I think it'd be a good thing for the community. Tried to partner with Coffeyville. They're going through it right now, but they kind of wanted to do their own thing, I guess. But anyway, I think it'd be valuable, and to support that, again, it'd be using a consultant. There'd be a cost, but I think it'd be invaluable for the community.
I'd certainly like to discuss it and learn more about it. I don't quite know what that is, I guess, but
Okay.
I can't see any reason not to consider it.
Sure, I can send you some information, an example of,
That'd be great.
okay.
I'd be interested in information to see if we can do it. You've been through it before, Craig?
Yeah.
So you kind of know what your community, what the cost figures were.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not,
But you would
there can
bring
be a
in-
range, sometimes depending on how much the city helps facilitate the consultant. If you have the consultant do everything, it might be this, but if the city staff can help do some things, it's worked out like that in different ways. So it's not horrendously expensive, but I think it's worth a look at.
A lot of times, somebody from the outside coming in to help develop a plan, it's a fresh set of eyes. They can pick things out that we'll overlook or miss or forget. With Roger Brooks, some of the things that he brought out, it seemed to be apparent, but from a new perspective, it came alive that, you know, you see things from a visitor's perspective. And
Okay.
okay,
Thanks, Craig.
if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, all of you in
Meeting adjourned.
attendance. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you, gentlemen.